podcast growth and expanding your impact. So what we're going to talk about in this video is how to set up a podcasting workflow. This is going to be a place where you put all your brain dump ideas and you keep track of each episode and where they are in the process from idea all the way to when it's actually complete, scheduled in your podcast host, and then also repurposed. So I'm going to walk you through what my process looks like, but I want to encourage you, no matter where you're at in your podcasting journey, to implement something like this, because what that's going to do for you is make it so much easier when you're ready to bring on your podcast manager, because you're going to have a seamless process for someone else to follow. This does not need to be done by you much longer. And so by implementing this process now, and for you to get into a rhythm of actually using this, you're going to be able to outsource it much easier and much better moving forward. So let's dive in. I'll show you what that looks like. Cool. So we are in Asana right now. As y'all probably know, I'm a big Asana fan. So I'd recommend, if you haven't already done so, I will link Asana below this video. But we're going to start by looking at the columns here. All right. So what I have is podcast processes. Once again, really, really helpful when you hire someone. This is going to be used for all of the cards that are just going to walk someone through where you find guests, where you want people to apply to be on your show, any of your podcast ideas. So let me walk you through some of mine, and then we'll move on to the next column. So under podcast processes for myself, I have hot podcast ideas. This is a running list of things. So when they come to mind, like, oh, I want to create a graphic for the side of my car that has my podcast on it. Boom. I added in hot podcast ideas. Or it'd be really cool to have a shirt that has my podcast information. So when I'm working out at the gym, someone can see that and start listening right there on the spot. Boom. Added into hot podcast ideas. So that way, when you're ready and you're like, I'm looking for a fun little project, you can go right into hot podcast ideas and you can pull something and implement. It's all in one place. So I have guests on my show. So this is like our process for bringing a guest on our show. And I'll walk you through exactly what that looks like in a separate video. But we have a thread for this. So me and my podcast manager both understand the process for how we bring a guest onto our show. That information is all here within Asana. Then we have shows to apply for. These are shows that either I or her have said, okay, these shows have our ideal listeners. We should go after them and work to get on the show, right? Our goal is to get on one per week. So we have a list here, a running list that we're constantly updating. And the cool thing is inside, let's say this one, shows to apply for. Inside what we do is we add a subtask. So like aligned with purpose in life and leadership, which is my podcast. So if this was for you, maybe you have my podcast listed, and inside the notes, you can put my email. You could put the message you're going to send, right? So then you get a process down for not just the shows you're looking to apply for, but what you're going to say to them and who you're going to say it to. And you can even put a date as to when you want this to be finished by. So for right now, this is going to keep you organized, but then when you bring someone else on, they know exactly what you're doing here. Those wheels started to turn yet? Okay, so that's how this works. And then I have right here Jamie to go after high-level shows, because there's some shows that are very, very, very popular, and I want to make sure that I'm reaching out to them in the form of like a voice note or a video or something. I don't want to reach out to them in the form of like an email like I would for some other shows. So we just have a different process for that. So that's all we have there. Processes to keep us all on the same page. And then the next column over is brain dump ideas. This column is for like, let's say you're on a walk and then boom, an idea lands. You can pull up the Asana app on your phone and just type it right in your board. That way you don't have notes all over the place in your notebook, in your notes on your phone, in your email. Like I used to email myself when I had ideas, no joke. I would email myself. In like, if your inbox is anything like mine, there's so many emails. And so I would never get back to the idea. Or I would be like, what was this even for? And I would just forget. And so the idea would be like lost. And so now I put everything into the brain dump ideas section. So when I go to sit down, I just finished 2 podcast episodes. All I did was I just drug it over to here, and I knew that was the episode that I was going to film, right? That's how that worked. So I've actually broken down exactly what an episode template should look like, and I'm going to walk you through that now, because there's a process for when you actually go through to film the episode. Okay, so I have an episode template that you should create for yourself, and it might look a little or a lot different than mine, but the idea remains. Create an episode template that you can just duplicate, and you do that by doing this. Duplicate task. So today's episode, right? And then it shows up. Here's how this looks. This is great for when you hire someone. You'd put the episode title here. Any notes that you have, so maybe you type out a bullet type script and you use Google Docs, you would copy the URL and paste it here. You could have a podcast description, LinkedIn post description, YouTube description. We actually are kind of minimizing this right now to just description, and we just kind of tailor the one for all these different platforms rather than writing out 3 separate ones. So you'll have title, notes, description. It's that simple. Then it's just a checklist. So I know I need to film, record a teaser for Instagram, do or don't need to do that. Take a photo for the thumbnail if you're doing video for YouTube. Edit video, pull audio, right? So you or your team could checklist this as you're going through the process so that you know where the other person is on the creative journey. Okay, and then we've got video instructions, audio instructions, and then if there's a guest, we have the information here for marketing materials, which I'm not going to walk you through right now because we're going to go over that in the guest episode, right? But this is how this can look for you. And now I'll open this up if you want to see what this looks like. So for video instructions, we have a list of things to do here, which includes content repurposing, which my team does, right? Or audio instructions as well. Okay, so we know it needs to be turned into a blog, pull a quote, create a carousel. So these are all the things that we know are on the checklist to complete for each episode. Okay, so like I said, yours could look slightly different, or if you are looking to do the same exact thing, that is possible too. So let's see. I was just alerted that my computer's gonna die. 1 second. My apologies. We do not want that to happen though. In the middle of the training. Jeez. Okay, so now moving forward, what I would do on this creative process is if we're about to film, like let's say we want to film this episode today and this episode today. I'm going to move them across on the board so I have clarity on where I'm going to show up and what I'm going to film today. Okay, so we would know, which this I just created as an example, so let me delete that. So we would know that we're going to film today's episode, and we're going to film Imagine living in a world with everyone connected to their purpose. So I've got my brain centered around where I'm going to show up today, okay? I do the same thing when I have guests coming onto the show, and I put their information here. Okay, so I would put the guest name, their contact information, all of that within this template here. Same exact template as before, okay? So through the creative process, let's say I just finished filming this episode. I'm gonna mark that as complete. Boom, boom, boom. And then I'm gonna move it to the edit section. Maybe. And at this point is when I would tag my podcast manager, or you would edit it on your own, and you'd set the due date, which I like to do the due date as the day the episode goes live. That way we just know exactly when it's like due to be finished. So that's how that part works. And then from there, we go into schedule and repurpose. So my podcast manager or yourself would realize, okay, this episode's been edited. It's ready to be scheduled into my podcast host, and the content is ready to be repurposed all over social media. Think of your podcast as the first and, quite frankly, the only piece of content that you really have to create, because you can repurpose that in so many different ways. We're going to talk about that in a separate video, but this is a great way to keep track of all the content that you've created within the same episode. Like you'll see right here, this is from episode 107, negative feedback. And we have our quote here. We are not for everyone. Not everyone is going to agree with the way you decide to do things. And so we have all of our graphics, right? This is from the expert series, The Secrets of a Badass Confidence Coach with Luke Anning. And so we've got the graphic here for Luke. We also have a link to the video here for Luke. We have everything within the one card for each episode, so we know that we need to repurpose it. It doesn't just like go into random folders all over your computer. It's like in one place, linking to those other places, okay? I promise you, just do this because it makes it so much nicer. Okay, and then once you're finished, once you've done everything that you want to do with that episode, move it over to complete, mark it finished. And then you can just kind of like, it's off your plate at that point, okay? So I'm gonna move these over, but that is what my workflow truly looks like. I can dive deeper into each one of those elements for you, but I would just recommend get Asana if you haven't already, set up your podcast content board, and just start brain dumping some ideas that you have for episodes in the brain dump ideas section. And then choose a day per week and give yourself 1 to 3 hours to film some content. So you'll batch content. What that means is like you would sit down and you'll film like 2 or 3 episodes at a time and then move them through your creative process. Okay, so just to clarify, set up your Asana board, brain dump some ideas, and then time block some space in your schedule to actually go through the creative process and take those episodes from just an idea to fully complete and scheduled out. All right, happy podcasting.